Passover. This is the most known and important holiday in Judaism. It stretches over a week, and some people start preparing months ahead before the holiday shows up. It's the festival that was celebrated at the last week of Jesus before his crucifixion in Jerusalem. So what is this holiday? What is the significance of it? How did it start? What are the obligations and traditions? The answer to those questions and more in this video. Many people start preparing for Passover weeks, sometimes months before its arrival, mostly in two aspects. One, learning about the commandments and the laws of Passover, since there's so many. The second thing is cleaning, organizing, and renewing the house. I don't mean the routine cleaning that most of us do like once a week. I am talking about this type of cleaning and organizing that people do once in a few years. For example, removing all the objects in the garage, cleaning the shelves, cabins, and closets, and then putting it all back whilst throwing the things you don't need anymore, or doing your wardrobe in the same way. And many people do this for their entire house. It's a lot of work. I guess that at this point I need to explain this craziness, right? At the peak of Exodus story, after God had already executed 9 out of 10 plagues against the Egyptians, and just before the last and harshest one, God gave Moses in Exodus 12 the following instructions. So Exodus 12:15, for 7 days you are to eat unleavened bread. On the first day, remove the leaven from your house, for whoever eats anything with leaven in it from the first day through the 7th must be cut off from Israel. And then in verse 19, for 7 days, no yeast is to be found in your houses. And anyone, whether foreigner or native, born, who eats anything with yeast in it must be cut off from the community of Israel. Eat nothing made with yeast. Wherever you live, you must eat unleavened bread. Now, of course, it might sound simple to get rid of everything that is leavened, but if you know Judaism, you know there's more to it. This is actually a great opportunity to understand a little more about Judaism. So let's mention the following. In Judaism, there is the written Torah, the divine instruction given by God, which is the first 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers. And there is the oral Torah, which is the other part of God's commandments and instructions, not mentioned in the first 5 books, but passed down orally from one generation to another, according to the tradition starting with Moses, until it was codified into 6 books known as the Mishnah, about 1600 years after the story of Exodus. This oral Torah, usually known among Christian scholars as rabbinical Torah or rabbinical law. Now, this body of work is often criticized or dismissed as having little relevance to Christians, as it's considered to be non-biblical. But the simple truth is that the oral Torah was no more than an attempt by the ancient Jewish sages to achieve consensus on how to practically fulfill the divine commandments of God. So an example, God said, don't eat leavened bread for 7 days and don't have it in your house. But one might ask, wait, what exactly is the definition of chametz? Chametz, by the way, is the word in Hebrew for leaven. So what is the definition of chametz, of leaven? What does it mean not having it in my house? Can I hide it? Can I bury it in the yard and use it after the holiday? So our ancient sages concluded that any of the following grains, wheat, barley, oat, rye, and buckwheat, combined with water and left to stand for more than 18 minutes is chametz. That's leaven. For the second question, there is a lot to it. Remember I said at the beginning that there's a lot of learning about Passover? But one of the basic guidelines is, like we say in Hebrew, bal yira'eh ve'bal yimatzeh, which translate to unfound and unseen, meaning you need to bring your house to a level that leaven can't be found at all, and it can't be seen. So there's no opening the closet and see a loaf of bread or some crackers. It's gotta be away. Now, honestly, preparing for Passover should be quite simple. There are just some basic actions that you need to do, mostly in the places where you eat or cook the leaven, the chametz, so the kitchen area and the dining area. So what made this so extreme? That the other name for this holiday is the cleaning holiday. People go above and beyond. And some people, me for example, hate this craziness, the pressure and the tasks that comes with it. So a few things. The first one is not knowing the actual halacha, meaning people are not really familiar with exactly what is it they're allowed to do, not allowed to do, or should do. So they end up doing way too much. So that's reason number one for this craziness in the cleaning holiday. Second, tradition. It is clear to all who research this that the further back we go, the less people did as far as preparation. And it's one of those things that grow with time. Just like Christmas was not as crazy as it is today 100 years ago. So it's just getting crazier with time. And the third reason is symbolism. The cleaning and organizing of our homes whilst getting rid of the chametz is a way for us to remind ourselves of the chametz that is within us. Cleaning our sins and impurities by removing leavening from ourselves for full 7 days gives us time to reflect upon our commitment to God and to seek out and remove sin from the innermost corners of our being. Passover starts on the 14th of the Hebrew month Nisan and goes on for 7 days. I hope that you understand the example that we presented here regarding rabbinical Torah. So there are instructions given by God to the people of Israel, but there's a lot of missing data for people to practice those commandments, those instructions. And that is what rabbinical Torah is all about. Just like the example we mentioned. What is exactly chametz? So that was an example. The evening before Passover, a leavened search, chametz search, is required. There is a tradition deliberately planned pieces of leaven in different places in the house. My wife grew up experiencing this tradition, so she insists that we will do that as well. She hid the different pieces in different places in the house, and me and my daughter were the search delegation. On the morning of the 14th, everybody will be done with getting rid of the chametz part, and many will go outside to burn the chametz. We call that in Hebrew bi'ur chametz, the burning of the leaven. After that, unless you have some last-minute cleaning, arrangements, or cooking to do, you can rest a little bit. In the evening, after everybody comes back from the synagogue, the Seder will finally start. Passover Seder is the ritual feast at the beginning of Passover. It is a very festive night, and most of us clean up pretty good. So after everybody comes back from the synagogue, we sit together around the table. We start the Seder. Seder, by the way, is the Hebrew word for order. There is a certain order of how to manifest this evening. So we start the Seder with the Haggadah. Haggadah is basically our guideline. That's a collection of quotes from our ancient sages, blessings, prayers, and songs edited to a relatively thin and colorful manuscript that is meant to lead us through the Passover Seder. There are a lot of reading parts, so many traditions came to be to keep it vivid and interesting, since one of the most important things is to tell it to your children as written in Exodus 13:8. On that day, tell your son, I do this because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. One of the things many families do is read in turns, clockwise or the opposite. Everybody, including the children, get to read, which keeps everybody more engaged, and there's a certain rhythm to the evening. Our ancient sages said that each person should tell and experience the story of Passover as if he himself has been redeemed. We recall the suffering at the hands of the Egyptians. We recall that God heard our prayers and took us out, as it is said, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Every generation is commanded to tell this story forever. A few of the prominent elements in the Passover Eve, the Seder, are the Passover plate and the generous amounts of wine. Each person should drink at least 4 glasses of wine. For those who have sensitivity to alcohol, no problem. In the Jewish world, kosher wine doesn't have to be with alcohol, so grape juice would do the trick. The Seder plate is a large plate with sections divided for various objects relating the Exodus. It's another element that our ancient sages decided on to emphasize the story and different parts of it. Another way to make it more interesting and memorable. So what's on the plate? Zroa, a lamb shank bone. Many people use chicken, but it's for the same purpose, to remind us the 10th plague and the Passover sacrifice, a sacrifice that used to be the main part of Passover many years after the Exodus, as long as there was a Jewish temple. Since there is no temple in our days and there hasn't been one for almost 2,000 years. No one sacrifices lambs or goats the way they used to when the first or second temple was standing. Boiled egg, a symbol of new life. This is a time of beginnings. It is spring after all. Charoset. This is another dip meant to remind us of the murder that was used to make the bricks in Egypt. It's usually sweet and made from dates, nuts, and wine, or apple, nuts, and wine. Depends in where you're from geographically. Maror, bitter herbs, reminds us of the bitterness of the slavery in Egypt. This is usually represented by a horseradish dip that is spicy and bitter at the same time. Karpas, a vegetable, usually celery or parsley, that you dip in salty water as a reminder of our tears during the slavery in Egypt. Matzah is the official unleavened bread of Passover. Usually very dry and tasteless, in my opinion, and many of us miss the taste and texture of actual bread during this week. The name Passover is explained in Exodus 12:21-23. Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go at once and select the animals for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood in the basin, and put some of the blood on the top and on both sides of the door frame. When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and sides of the door frame and will pass over that doorway. And he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down." So slaughtering a lamb or a sheep, cooking it on fire and eating it is the Passover itself, or at least it used to be when the Jewish temples were still around. Passover, like some other Jewish holidays, is what we call Yom Tov. It is very similar to Shabbat, Sabbath, with its limitations or advantages. This means that no work is allowed to be done, no electricity can be operated. There is a use of electricity on Sabbath, on Shabbat, and holidays, but everything is pre-pressed and preset. Starting a fire is definitely a big no-no on Shabbat, on Sabbath. So what is the difference between Shabbat, Sabbath, to Yom Tov? In Yom Tov, which is translated to good day, this is how we call the holidays, you are permitted to do work that is relevant for cooking or preparing food for your household and guests. So this is something you would never be doing on Shabbat, but in the holidays, you're allowed to cook and prepare food. Many take advantage of this opportunity to light up some coals and start a barbecue. By the way, this is why I couldn't film my own family in the Seder, in the Passover Eve. They are religious, so I wish I could. The next day after the Seder Eve, those who choose will go to the synagogue in the morning. Later, there's going to be a big brunch around 1 p.m. The atmosphere and vibes on this day are very similar to the Shabbat, to the Sabbath. So nice strolls outside, and most go to rest after the big lunch, especially if they woke up early for the synagogue. The Passover, or at least the part that is known as Chag Rishon, the first holiday, will be finished about 25 hours after it started, just like Shabbat. Then all the limitations are lifted and you are free to light a fire and use electricity freely. At that point, we enter into a period of 4 days that are known as Chol HaMoed. One way of translating that is mundane of the holiday. It's intermediate days, as the name implies. These days have a mix of features of Chol, mundane, and Moed, holidays, something in between a holiday and a mundane day. So some people will take those days off work, some will work, some businesses will be closed, some will close earlier than usual. Many people, many Israelis will travel to different places in this beautiful country. After Chol HaMoed, we will have a second holiday, Chag Sheni, as instructed in Exodus 12:16. On the first day, hold a sacred assembly, and another one on the seventh day. Do not work at all in these days, except to prepare food for everyone to eat. That is all you may do. Okay, so we see that in this verse, a second holiday is mentioned. Now, there's no specific explanation of why the second one. But our ancient sages determined that that day commemorates the date that Moses split the Red Sea, enabling the children of Israel a safe crossing. Passover is one of 3 pilgrimage festivals, along with Sukkot, the Butz or Tabernacle Festival, and Shavuot, better known in English as Pentecost. When the sacred temple stood, many traveled to Jerusalem. And even today, with no temple, many still do, and Jerusalem is full with visitors who choose to spend their holiday there. The atmosphere is very festive in the capital in this time of the year. So to summarize, friends, Passover is a huge part of the Jewish heritage, Jewish identity, and Jewish values. Even Jews who consider themselves very secular will celebrate it in one way or another. I hope you enjoyed learning about this unique and important Jewish holiday. Thank you for watching.